Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanne Z, and I'm the Senior Clinical Director for the Transplant Program at University Health Network. Thanks for joining us today. So you're joining your Nutrition Questions Answered session, and we have a very distinguished panel with us today. But before I hand it over to our panel to introduce themselves, just wanted to go a little bit over the logistics. So today, if you want to submit questions, please log into Slido, hashtag LU stands for lunch, 2, LU2. So thanks very much again. And we're really excited. This is an important topic. We know that food matters, and diet and safety and how it relates to transplant is really, really important. So we're so thrilled to have this panel with us. So I'm going to start off. If Diana, you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Diana Major. I'm an associate professor of clinical nutrition at the University of Alberta and a clinical pediatric dietitian who's worked for years in pediatric hepatology, pre and post-transplant. My research program also focuses on the impact of nutrition on liver health.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Mandy.
Hello, hi, my name is Mandy, and I'm one of the transplant dietitian working in the multi-organ transplant program at the Toronto General Hospital. So I work with patients who are admitted to the hospital when they're very sick in their end-stage disease and requiring transplant, and also help with post-transplant patients to help with their recovery after their surgery. So I work mostly with lung and liver transplant, and also patients who require both the kidney and pancreas transplant. We have another dietitian who works with only kidney transplant, but unfortunately she isn't able to join us today. So I'll try my best to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much. And last but not least on our panel is Kalina.
Hi, my name is Kalina Yim, and I'm a nurse practitioner working here at the Toronto Centre for Liver Disease in the liver clinic. So my clinical focus is on viral hepatitis, and meaning that I see a lot of patients with hepatitis B and C. And I also look after a subgroup of patients who are very sick, who have end-stage liver disease requiring paracentesis. So I do have a spectrum, like patients with a spectrum disease, meaning from someone who have inactive liver disease to someone who have the end-stage liver disease. So I must add that I've been working here in the liver clinic for 30 years. So I do have seen a lot of patients. And because of my language skills, also because of my specialty in hepatitis B, I do see a lot of ethnic Chinese in my practice. So I think that I can maybe speak about like some ethnic considerations if some people have some questions. And yeah, that's all.
That's great. Thanks, Kalina. So as you can see today, we've got this very incredible, experienced, distinguished panel. So I think it's going to be an exciting hour that we're going to learn lots and be able to pose questions. So again, slido.com, hashtag LU2 to submit your questions. Just a reminder, today's session is being recorded and will be available in the Center of Living Donations YouTube channel. And if you did register with Everbright, you'll also receive a follow-up email. So, all right, let's start with a question. And I wanted to start off with a real general question. As we know, UHN is an academic hospital working with various universities and organizations. And we pose the question, what does the research tell us about the link between food and liver or kidney health? So what's the latest research telling us? Why don't I start off with Diana?
So there's a lot of new emerging research related to liver disease and food. Certainly in the area of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, there's lots of evidence, for example, that shows that eating a diet that is focused on fruits and vegetables can really be healthy in terms of limiting the amount of fat, extra fat you store in your liver. So that's really important, especially for individuals with milder liver diseases. When you go to the spectrum of more serious liver disease that both Colina and Mandy have lots of experience with, and so do I. And then some important things to think about what the literature shows is, for example, the quality of the type of fat that you eat. Long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids are really great in terms of promoting anti-inflammatory properties in the liver. It's important to avoid fasting for patients with end-stage liver failure in order to keep your blood sugar in the healthy reference ranges. So eating smaller meals that are calorically dense, that have high sources of protein in them are important, because there are some amino acids, for example, that can help build up your muscles as well. And so those are all areas that are really interesting to me in terms of trying to promote liver health in adults with liver disease. Mandy, I'm sure you have lots more to add.
I had a question, actually, if that's okay. Just you mentioned vegetables and fruits. Does it matter if it's raw versus cooked? Does that affect the nutrition level?
If you boil, for example, vegetables for a long period of time, you can lose some of the B vitamins in the water. So lots of boiling probably will reduce the nutrient impact of those, but steaming is fine, or perhaps even microwaving. It's really more about looking at, I always say, make your plate shimmer. The new Canada's Food Guide really emphasizes green, red, orange, and yellow vegetables, and you really want your plate to pop. And that's especially important with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as well, because those have lots of antioxidants in them, and that helps fight against inflammation in that kind of condition.
Great, thanks.
Can I just sort of project here for a point that you just talked about, that like cooked vegetables, like, you know, in ethnic Chinese diet.
Sure.
They don't, I guess, like including myself, I'm not a particular in favor of raw vegetables. So a lot of, we steam all our vegetables.
Yeah.
Steaming, but also boiling. So actually, I understand about this, like, you know, destroying of nutrients if you're boiling for too long. So what I usually educate my patient is, yes, you can boil it, but don't boil it for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that is like broccoli. I mean, a lot of ethnic Chinese, they don't eat raw broccolis, right? Versus Westerners.
But they eat steamed broccoli, right?
Yes.
In the stir fry.
And stir fry. So I always have to remind them, don't stir fry them too well, you know, so that you don't lose too much of the nutrients. And again, another point that you talk about, avoid fasting. I think that is very important, especially in the advanced liver disease patient group, right? So I see that a lot when people have the complication of ascites, when their belly is so full of acidic fluid, because they don't have the appetite, they don't want to eat. And that is the time that when they start losing a lot of muscles, right? That is the appetite issue. Yeah.
And also because, you know, in the fasted state, they'll utilize their lean body mass stores for energy to keep their blood sugars in the normal reference ranges. And that's not a good thing either. If you're depleting your skeletal muscle mass, you become very frail, and that's been associated with increased morbidity and mortality as well. So late evening snacks that are small but can be compacted. For example, you could eat like rice and put a little bit of meat in there as well, if that's what you like to eat. So rice balls, for example, in China are often with a little bit of pork, for example, if you eat pork, are often a late evening snack that's recommended to patients with end-stage liver failure. So I agree with that totally.
Yeah, I agree. From a transplant perspective, malnutrition is very common among my patients with end-stage liver disease. So the main goal for end-stage liver disease before transplant is to avoid the weight loss, maintain their muscle mass by eating small frequent meals. We usually order a nighttime snack for them, including a protein and a carbs. Sometimes even a nutritional supplement drink at nighttime may be helpful too. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think that really highlights some of the latest kind of research and how we can link food and nutrition to healthier outcomes. So thank you.
Mandy, can I just, sorry to interrupt again. So talking about the latest, I just want, I'm not sure whether Diana would be talking about, I want to talk about the relationship of coffee and the liver. So, because there are so many research now on the benefits of coffee for the liver. So one of my pet peeves now, when patient tell me that, oh, I spent like, this amount of money on buying all the herbal supplements, I said, no, go for coffee. But of course, we still have to be cautious that we don't want patients to take a double in their coffee. But we definitely, like, coffee has been proven to be good for the liver. It can lower your liver enzymes. You can even prevent liver cancer. But in general, it is better, I would say, a supplement than any of those that, you see on the shelf, like liver cleansing tablets or things like that. So,
and I agree with that. The only concern I have is that we have to be cautious about how much coffee, so that you don't displace what little food you do eat too, right? So
sure,
I think we have to balance it, because coffee doesn't have any protein in it.
Yeah.
And while I agree with you, the literature shows that we want to make sure they don't displace how much of those nutrient dense snacks when they have end stage liver failure, because it's hard enough to maintain lean body mass. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think a lot of us like our caffeine. And so when you talk about moderation, is it, is there an amount that you would recommend? 1 cup a day, 2 cup a day? What's too much?
Well, I think the range of caffeine, it depends on the type of coffee you do drink, right? And in terms of the milligrams of coffee, but usually we don't say much more than 2 cups of coffee a day. We're not talking about 5 or 6 cups of coffee, because you for sure will interfere with your oral intake and displace your nutrients. But 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day are perfectly fine, and may even be beneficial. I don't think we know the exact amount of caffeine, but there's different brand names of those commercial coffee outlets, and some have a higher concentration of caffeine in them than others do. So
yeah, no, I agree. So it's we tell our patients, like, so a lot of patients are concerned, right? It's like, oh, I have liver problem, I cannot take any caffeine. So I said, well, no, you can take, like, up to 2 cups a day is absolutely fine. As like, Diana mentioned about this, make sure that it's not displacing your other protein intake and your food intake. It is fine. And we also know that from research, taking the percolated coffee is better than the instant coffee. That's not as much caffeine in the instant coffee. And also, the study have done compare coffee and tea. So coffee is better than green tea as well. So it's just something like, so that you can be so comfortably taking 1 to 2 cups of coffee per day.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I was just going to ask the question around, I know individuals who may not like coffee, is there an alternative to tea or, soda, caffeine soda? No. Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you. The next question I'm going to segue into is a real question that we get a lot of, and it's around that balance of taste and the food profile compared to what's safe and what's not safe. So food safety is a big question that we get, and often we talk about raw fish. Sushi is one question. How do you define healthy eating, and what are some do's and don'ts of safety, and how do you mix that with flavor, variety, and living a good quality of life? So maybe we should start off. Who wants to take that one? Diana?
I'll start, but I think actually Mandy would probably have a lot to say about that. I mean, certainly we do have to be concerned about microbial content in foods like sushi. And so for post-transplant, we do tend to recommend to avoid that. I mean, I'm all for food tasting great. So using a variety of spices is a great idea. You have to be careful about salt though, right? For when you have end-stage liver problems, salt can worsen ascites and make things worse. So there are lots of other ways to taste up your food by adding lemon. There are salt substitutes, but you have to be wary of them if you have kidney problems and problems with high potassium levels. So but there are lots of other spices that taste really good, like ginger, for example. Fresh garlic can be added to food too, to give it, depending on your cultural preferences of adding things to the food to make it tasty. I mean, Mandy, what would you suggest?
I'll comment about the post-transplant piece then. So
Yeah.
if you're taking the anti-rejection medication after your transplant, your body's immune system will be weaker. So food safety is very important to prevent food poisoning or any food-related illness. So it's very important to wash your hand before preparing any foods. Make sure foods such as meat, poultry, seafood, eggs are well cooked. Dairy items and fruit juice should be pasteurized. Salad should be very well washed at home. I usually suggest my patients to avoid salads when eating out because you're not sure how well they wash the salad. So I would suggest having salads at home would be much safer. We have a booklet from Health Canada. We usually use this booklet to teach our patients before they leave the hospital. It has a really good chart that talks about what foods are safe and the internal food temperature. So if you're interested, I can let you guys know about the link to find this booklet. And you can also Google it from Health Canada. You can always find this booklet there.
I think we can probably send it out and maybe post it in somewhere that people could link onto that. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Can I ask Mandy a question?
Yeah.
So it's not that I advocate people to go out to restaurant and eat, but I know that like when we go to a restaurant and we have leftovers, we always like to take the leftovers home and eat it other day. So how safe is it? Because I do have patients ask me. I personally, when I take food home, then I would try to eat it within the next day. But is this safe? Or would you recommend to just put the leftover in the freezer? I mean, like, you know, what we should do with the leftovers.
Well,
or maybe we should not take the leftover home.
Well, definitely take the leftover home. I don't suggest wasting food. If you go home right away, store it in the fridge below 4 Celsius, and then make sure before you eat it, reheat it very well. Make sure that it's heated throughout. So that should be safe to reheat the food. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that suggestion. So I'm wondering if we should turn to Slido and look at questions from our audience. Okay. So why don't we go with the first question, which is it recommended to have a low protein diet post-kidney transplant? Is it necessary for protein to be plant-based? Do we want Mandy? Do you want to take that?
Sure. So usually in the first 6 to 8 weeks after your transplant surgery, it's usually recommended to increase your protein and calorie intake to help with the healing after your surgery. Because during your hospital stay, you may not have eaten well and you may have lost some protein during surgery. So it's recommended to choose high quality proteins such as chicken, turkey, fish, lean meat, eggs, and also plant-based protein too. But it's your personal choice to have meat or plant-based protein. But plant-based protein does have higher fiber content and no saturated fat. But one thing to consider is that it's your blood work, because some individual may have increased potassium from your transplant medication. So your healthcare team will monitor your lab work closely and will let you know if you need to limit any high potassium or phosphorus food based on your lab work.
Thank you. Now, is this different from a liver perspective? Because this question was specific.
It's the same for liver as well. The team will monitor your blood work as well. And because I do see patients post liver transplant, and some of them may have high potassium as well. So they sometimes need potassium restriction. Yeah.
Does anyone else from the panel have anything else to add before we go?
Just wanted to add it's very important to look at the if you use like salt substitutes or other allspices, to make sure that you check on whether or not that contains potassium, because there are a lot of salt substitutes and ultra processed foods that contain a lot of potassium in them and can be big contributors to elevated potassium as well in the diet. So that's something really to think about. Definitely plant-based proteins are very healthy choices in terms of longitudinal longitudinal like high lipids and so forth. But as Mandy said, I do think that animal-based proteins are high-quality proteins, and they should be also encouraged, but based on personal preference of what someone wants to eat. And from a liver perspective, because patients have had loss of lean body mass pre-transplant, it's also important for them to eat a high-quality protein and sufficient protein in order to help maintain what lean body mass they have as well, because that's going to be a ongoing issue if you eat a low-protein diet. And you don't need to, if your organ is working post-transplant, then you should be eating a protein-focused diet.
Great, thank you. All right, our next attendee, Len Hodder, thank you for submitting this question. And my background is rehabilitation, and I always think of, prehab. So before surgery, we'll ask the question, for a living kidney donor, is there an optimal diet for the months leading up to the surgery to be in the best condition for donation and recovery, and then long-term afterwards, living with one kidney? Let's see who can take that one. Shall we have Mandy?
Sure, yes, I can address that. So prior to kidney donation or any other surgery, so it is very important to have optimal nutrition, including adequate calories and protein to help with the recovery post-surgery as well. So it's recommended to follow the Canada's Food Guide, eating a well-balanced diet, including complex carbs, protein, vegetables, and fruits, and dairy. But in the long term, post-kidney donation, it's important to maintain a healthy, balanced diet as well, as your kidney is able to perform the same function.
Yeah. Great. Anyone else, anything to add to that?
So I think Mandy said it very well.
I agree.
Great, thank you. The next question. So for patients who are pre-dialysis, do you have tricks to decrease sodium consumption while making food taste delicious? Ideas for low sodium snacks. I keep watching I keep watching Food Channel, and some chefs always say, double the salt to give more flavor. So any ideas around this one?
Well, I love lemon juice to add to food. I really think that really zests it up a little bit, and lime juice for certain foods too. And you can use other spices, right? There's a variety of other spices that in different ethnic cuisines, such as paprika, for example, and some European ethnic cuisines really can give foods like chicken and potatoes a zest that you wouldn't expect. And so it is hard to switch. If you're used to adding it at the table, your very first good step to dealing with this is to stop adding it to your food first before you make other changes, and maybe try some of these other alternatives. There are other like Mr. Dash type things, but again, if you have elevated serum potassium, as Mandy indicated in other questions, that could be an issue and contributing to it. But I mean, I'm sure Colina and Mandy have lots of other good tips too.
I personally I love black pepper, and that is the spice that I put in a lot of my food. What I found too is I sort of adopted from the Vietnamese cuisine, and that is what I recommend my patients try lemongrass and lime. It's beautiful, it tastes, yes, yeah. And also, as you, Diana, you said other spices in the different ethnic group, like in Chinese, there's some spices, the 5-flower spice, and so I mean, try to explore, because everyone's taste is different. So I cannot say, well, this is good, but just have to be mindful though when you pick up spices from supermarket, and make sure you look at the content though, because sometimes they are pre-mixed and there's so much already mixed in the spices itself. It's not pure, and there are sodium content in it. So it's just to be mindful it's just make sure every time look at the labels when you shop.
Thank you. The second part of the question is really interesting around, do you have ideas for low sodium snacks? I think of in my desk, I probably have a couple of bags of chips for those emergency snacks in the middle of the day. Do you have any ideas around low sodium snacks?
Well, I happen to love baked like zucchinis, and I always keep veggies in my drawers because I've got smaller kids, and when they come to visit in the office before COVID, to make sure that I have those kind of snacks. You can bake different vegetables with just a little bit of olive oil and make them crispy, and so almost like make your own chips, but very low on the oil, and then you don't have any extra sodium with that. So kale is great like that. My grad students used to bake me kale chips with a little bit of olive oil. You just put it on a baking tray in the oven, and we would have a snack of crispy kale, and it actually changes the whole flavor of kale. You need new kale though, not older kale, because that could be a little bit bitter. So I like those kind of snacks. They give you that crispy feeling without adding any extra sodium.
Yeah, sounds delicious. I think we scheduled this session during lunchtime, noon, and it's making everyone probably listening a bit hungry. Any other ideas for low sodium snacks from others?
My rule of thumb is always have a protein with a starch when it comes to snack. So no salt added nuts with crackers would be a good snack. Even a slice of bread with peanut butter can be a very simple snack. Yogurt with fruits can be a very simple snack that you can usually have at home. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's what I usually recommend to patients as well, is those no added salt nuts like walnuts. Just buy the fresh ones and crack up the shells and then eat it fresh, and no salt added other cashews and things like that. I personally like sesame snap. I don't know, of course, I feel it's kind of sweet, but that is my favorite snack, is the sesame snap. So maybe here the dietitians can advise me, is that a good snack or not?
It sounds delicious. All right. Well, thank you for answering those questions and your personal favorite snacks. So the next question is, post-transplant patients can become diabetic. What diet should one follow to try to prevent this?
So I'll address this question.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so some people may develop diabetes as a side effect from their steroid medication called prednisone. You can manage this side effect by limiting foods that are concentrated source of sugar and following a balanced eating pattern. Sugar and sweets, such as sugar, regular pop, fruit juice, dessert, cakes, pastry, I would suggest usually to try to limit, and if possible, and if approved by your transplant team, adding some exercise would be a great idea to help manage blood sugar.
That's great. Anyone else with anything to add on that one?
Just that if you do have a sweet tooth, you could use a sugar substitute. You could even try baking some muffins that are made with whole wheat flour. They could be a corn-based muffin. It'll give you that feeling of having a little bit of a sugary food, but it's not actually sugary, right? Because it's a more complex carbohydrate. So be creative about making different types of muffins, but make sure that these are muffins that are using whole wheat flours and a limited amount of added sugar to the recipe, so that you can get a bit of a zip flavor. Add cranberries to muffins as well, and cut the sugar content in that muffin recipe in half, because cranberries or blueberries are naturally occurring sugars, and that they can give you that sense of sweetness without actually increasing your burden of simple sugars.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Just speaking of diets, I'm going to get off topic a little bit from Slido, but we hear a lot about trend diets, and I think the latest one has been about fasting. Depending on your age, how long should you fast for? I'm just wondering the research around that and how that impacts transplant recipients as well as donors, what your thoughts around that are. I think, Diana, you might have, or Mandy?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it is really popular. Lots of people for weight loss, want to eat diets where they prolong their food intake. I mean, we all fast overnight for 12 hours, and that's fine. But if you're talking about long-term intermittent fasting where you go more than 16 or 18 hours a day, that's not really actually the best way for liver health in particular, because you really do end up eating more calories or displacing your energy intake. And moreover, with end-stage liver disease, I would actually say an intermittent fasting approach is not healthy for the patient at all because of the reasons we mentioned before. Patients with end-stage liver failure typically have elevated energy expenditure. They need more calories, but they also should not go for prolonged periods of time in terms of their liver health. So that's not a great idea because they'll utilize their lean body mass, as I mentioned before. So intermittent fasting is really not the best approach for nutrition and liver health in the end-stage liver processes. And it's not the best choice even for a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, mild disease as well. In terms of substrate and the way you change the way substrates are used in the body, it's not really the healthiest approach either. If you're talking about just keeping your hours of eating for someone with mild liver disease like NAFLD in an 8 to 10 hour period and in extending your overnight fast to 12 or 14 hours, I think that could be a way to help you monitor how much you're eating, and that would be fine. But any longer than that really isn't doing yourself any favor, because you really will go to using your lean body mass for energy, and then that just slows down your energy metabolism even more. They're also popular because they talk about ketogenic diets, like let's eat, not only do intermittent fasting, but let's do that with a very low carbohydrate intake, because then you can mobilize fat stores. And that's a popular weight loss strategy that people have been employing. And you can get short-term weight loss for sure with that approach, but it's not really been proven whether that's optimal for your liver health either. And a lot of what you're losing in the short term is fluid and lean body mass with those approaches. So you have to be careful. People like those diets because if you eat a very low carbohydrate diet, you build up ketone bodies in your body and you don't feel as hungry. And that's one of the reasons why you keep hearing about those intermittent ketogenic type diets in the media. Not a good idea for anybody with end-stage liver failure. And post-transplant, I'm going to let Mandy comment on those.
In terms of post-transplant, we don't usually recommend fasting because with post-transplant, you do need enough calories and protein to help with the healing post-surgery. And also we do recommend, let's say transplant patients who are on anti-rejection medication are at a higher risk of getting diabetes. So fasting would be a dangerous option. Let's say if you're on any insulin or any diabetic meds.
Thank you. I think all these different diets that pop up and claim success, I think it's really good to kind of relate how that impacts transplant and liver and kidney function post-operatively. So thank you so much. I just wanted to say one of our attendees also passed on a website. For those viewers, www.myspiceit.up.ca has a wealth of delicious low sodium recipes for renal patients. Anyone looking for a low sodium, potassium, and phosphorus food option. So thank you very much to our viewers who sent that in. If we go to the next question, leg cramps. We know that can be so painful and disruptive. So it can be a result of low magnesium, and the foods that this individual is consuming doesn't seem to be helping. So what would you recommend that would be easy to digest? Would this be a Mandy and question, potentially?
So magnesium foods, legumes, nuts, seeds, fish, leafy greens are good source of magnesium. So if your potassium and phosphorus levels are okay, I would usually suggest you increase the intake of pumpkin or squash seeds, nuts, and sunflower seeds. For example, a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds provide about 300 milligrams of magnesium already. So if the level remains low, you may need to consult your transplant team to see which medication or which supplement may be appropriate for you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's such a delicate balance to make sure, individual changes can really impact the overall outcome. So it is important to speak with your healthcare provider and team on that. So thank you. Next question. Do you recommend a person with liver disease do an over-the-counter detox? If not, is there a certain kind of food that will detox and remove fat in the liver? Who wants to take that one?
Wow, I actually
Well,
don't
Diana, yeah.
recommend a detox formulation for the liver. If you would like to help your liver not have as much fat, then I can tell you things to eat, like fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables, to reduce your amount of extra fat in your diet, particularly saturated fat. So make sure you eat lean cuts of meat. If you eat a lot of saturated fat and a lot of foods with added sugars, like sugar sweetened beverages, carbonated beverages, cakes, cookies, or whatever, that actually builds up causes your pancreas to secrete more insulin, and that insulin stimulates fat production in the liver. And so the best way to not speed up fat production in the liver is to reduce the amount of intake of those types of foods. And if you follow Canada's food guide, again, coming back to that plate with shimmering with fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and your plant proteins, and making sure that they are lean cuts of meat when you do eat meat, that's the best way to reduce the rate of fat production in your liver. And if you reduce the rate of fat production, eventually you can reduce the amount of fat in your liver, particularly in the early stages, for example, of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So over-the-counter detox remedies that make promises about your liver health some of them could actually be harmful for your liver. So that's my viewpoint about that. Colina, you might have something to suggest as well.
I think you have said it beautifully about what to be mindful of what you eat when you have fat in the liver. So I guess what I would like to add though is there's really no magic bullet in getting rid of fat in the liver. So right now we do have clinical trials, like medications that would help with fatty liver, but again, these are really early trials and they are not approved or anything. So the mainstay of treatment for fat in the liver right now is healthy eating, as Diana suggested, and also regular exercise. That's really the best intervention. Another thing I like to add is a lot of time, fatty liver is closely associated with diabetes and high cholesterol. So just to make sure that you have your blood sugar and your cholesterol check and your lipids check, and to make sure that they're not at excessive level, or if you are already taking those medications, just to make sure that they are well controlled, because if the diabetes and cholesterol, they're not well controlled, it can very well give you fatty liver as well.
I agree.
That's great. All right. Thank you. Now, this next one is specific, but it's a great important question. So sometimes the gallbladder removal is part of transplant. Is there anything special around the diet recommendations that you would have for that? Anyone want to take that one? Mandy?
I can address, yeah. So for gallbladder removal, so usually gallbladder is where we store the bile to help digest fats. So even with or without gallbladder, post-transplant, we usually recommend people to avoid a very high fat diet, because when you're on the anti-rejection meds, it can have a side effect to raise your cholesterol level, and also side effects of weight gain as well. So I would suggest to continue to follow a moderation fat diet. Don't have too much of the saturated fat overall. So Yeah, so even with the gallbladder removed, it's the same diet that we would suggest to post-transplant patients. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So the next couple of questions from our audience relate to supplements. And so the first question is around someone with liver disease having difficulty eating enough protein. Is a protein supplement like Pro-T, Gold liquid protein shot okay?
Well, I don't think I can answer because I don't know what it is. So maybe Diana, you can help with this question.
So honestly, I haven't had experience with this, so I looked it up. I'm just going to be honest, just to see if I could see what the nutrient content was. And it looks like it's about 1 ounce has 17 grams of protein in it. It's a collagen-based protein from what I could tell. The only concern I had about it is that it was difficult for me to tell if that was a nutrient, like a complete mixture of all the essential amino acids in that formulation. So I'm not really sure because I'm not familiar with that exact product. The concept of taking a protein supplement, though, for example, in other commercial products where we do know the amino acid profile is complete, there are a variety of brand names out there like Ensure or Boost. It's perfectly okay to drink to supplement your diet with those foods. The only caution I have again is you don't want to displace your oral intake with the use of those supplements. So so long as you still are eating your small frequent meals, if you want to take that supplement with it, make sure you take it with some carbohydrate, because from what I could tell in this product that it was carbohydrate free. So you'd really want to make sure that if you're going to drink this, take it with some crackers, or like Mandy mentioned before, maybe some bread, maybe take it with another protein source like peanut butter if that's what you like. And I could not tell if there was a do harm associated with this. I don't think so. But because I'm not very familiar with it, I do think that it's important to give a comprehensive answer for me to look at the details in more detail.
Great. I think that's just really important advice in general around supplements as a whole. It sounds like, really working with your healthcare provider to review the actual makeup of that supplement, because one product is not equal to another.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah, I think I would add that is supplements and all the herbal remedies as well. And in fact, many like herbals, they're actually toxic for the liver. So we have to really be careful not to take anything, casually.
Yeah, such valuable advice, because sometimes those labels and at the back of supplements, it's a lot of information, and how you tease that out, the professional to work with your clinician. So thank you. The next supplement was around omega-3. Is it okay to take that after transplant? Who wants to start with that one?
In terms of omega-3 supplements after transplant, because there's a lot of different source of the supplements, let's say from fish liver oil, or from different source, I would suggest that when you're on all the anti-rejection meds, it's very important to let your team know, your healthcare provider know, your pharmacist know if it's okay to take this omega-3 supplements. Omega-3, if you obtain it from fish or any food source, that would be totally fine. But if you're considering any supplements, I would suggest that you take it back to the team and see if that's okay with all your other medications.
Thank you. Anyone else with anything to add on that one before we go to the next?
Just from a NAFLD point of view, there is some evidence, it's not really strong, but there's some evidence that omega-3 supplementation can be helpful in terms of promoting anti-inflammatory properties in the liver. It's not a specifically recommended strategy to help with fat buildup in the liver. There's certainly for lipid clearance, for example, with patients that have high lipids, there is evidence that omega-3s can help facilitate lipid clearance. But I agree with Mandy, you should always talk to your healthcare provider before you start to supplement, because you could be on some meds where that could have an impact as well. And then, of course, eating foods that are high in omega-3s, like fatty fishes, are a great way of getting dietary omega-3s.
Thank you. So our next question, I kind of alluded to it a little bit, but let me just see. Roughly how much protein, oh, thank you for helping this. Can you give us any tips on reading those labels on the back of packages and food? What should I be looking for? I was told to reduce sodium, but what does that actually mean in terms of what is on the label? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can start with how do you know whether something's a good source of a nutrient or a poor source on the food label? There is a value that's called percent DV, daily value, on the back of a food label. And if something is 15% or more, then it's high in that nutrient. And if it's 5% or less, it's considered a low source. So you definitely, when you're looking at sodium, want to choose something that's much less than 15%. Because, so if you're looking at two food labels, one that's over 15% of the DV versus one that's significantly lower, such as 10% or lower, would be a good idea. And in fact, if you can find things even lower than 10%, that would be great from a sodium perspective. So I would look at that percent DV. Mandy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so when it's also important to look at the serving size as well. So compare the serving size to the amount you eat, because this amount tells you the size of the single serving of the numbers that were listed in the package. Then you would go down the list and look at the calories, the protein, the fat, the sodium, and calcium. You should have less of the sodium and the fat. And on the other side, there's where Diane mentioned about the percent DV that you can compare between different foods as well.
Thank you. Kalina, any tips from your end?
I don't have anything else to add. And I think Mandy pointed out that look at the serving size is very important, because I actually have families and say, oh, like, you know, it's not that bad. When you look at it, oh, they're referring to, like, you know, 2 serving size or whatever. So just be careful when you read the whole thing and read all the labels together. And also sometimes you can compare as well, you know, have different type of cans, like for example, can of food or canned soup or whatever, and then just compare so that you know the nutrition value and the sodium value on each one.
Great, thank you. So the next question is around the type of protein or how protein is derived. How effective is it to move from meat-based protein to plant-based protein? And this was in particular referring to kidney transplants. Diana, do you want to start us off?
I think that moving from meat to plant-based protein is really a personal preference. Eating complete proteins are really important, and high-quality proteins. There's lots of plant proteins that really are great sources of protein, like soy, for example. And so it is effective from long-term risk of cardiovascular complications like high levels of blood lipids and cholesterol. That's a common complication post-transplant in adults. And so eating a plant-based diet can help with that. But you have to keep in mind about your overall muscle health too, because if you suffered from reduced lean body mass pre-transplant, if you've been on dialysis for a long period of time, then you do need to make sure that you're eating enough of the plant-based proteins. And then there'll be concerns about electrolytes too, and electrolyte stability after transplant, but I'll leave that for Mandy to talk about as well.
So before kidney transplant, you're very likely on dialysis, and your team would probably tell you to limit the high potassium and high phosphorus foods, and a lot of the plant-based protein are quite high in potassium and phosphorus as well. But after kidney transplant, most people can go back to a regular diet, and their blood work would be checked very regularly by the transplant team. So in this case, it would be fine to include plant-based protein in your diet. And like Diana said, it's a very healthy source of protein as well, high in fiber and low saturated fat content. But some post-kidney transplant patients may develop high potassium from their medication. So in that case, the plant-based protein would need to be limited. So it's very individualized based on your blood work.
Great. Thank you. I think what I'm hearing is it's individualized, and yeah, that definitely both are options. So thank you. Our next question, roughly how much protein should one consume daily? Understandable that every patient is different with the numbers. Should we start with, from a transplant perspective, Mandy, do you want to start us off?
So like this participant mentioned, everyone's protein need is different depending on their health condition. In general, we usually recommend healthy individuals to have 1 gram of protein per kilogram of their body weight. But if you have kidney disease without dialysis, your protein need might be lower. But if you have other conditions like cirrhosis and stage liver disease, then that may, and any other condition that may lead to malnutrition, your protein need may be higher. So again, it's very individualized depending on your health condition.
That's great. I just wanted to take a pause to acknowledge we've got lots of great people that are tuning in today and sending us links to fantastic resources. So I'm sure we're going to find a way to post some of these links in our follow-up email for those that have signed up through the event, the Bright. So thank you.
So just to add to what Mandy said about the protein daily intake. So for patients with end-stage liver disease, that we usually recommend 1.5 gram of protein per day. Is that correct, like Diana?
Yes.
Yeah, and Mandy?
1.2
Yeah.
to 1.5.
Exactly, yeah. So because that is the, it is because people with end-stage liver disease, they tend to lose muscle, and muscle loss is a big complications from cirrhosis. So we have to make sure that these people are taking enough protein.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. They definitely have increased protein needs.
Very individualized based on the health condition.
Yes.
Great. All right, that was a great discussion and tips. This one is a great question around weight-bearing exercise versus non-weight bearing. Is it necessary to maintain muscle mass, or is it just general exercise in combination with the right diet that's good for us? Who wants to take that one?
So I actually do think there's strong evidence to show that weight-bearing exercise is not only important for your bone health, but for your muscles. So that can be just walking, plain walking, or it could be things like resistance exercises, like with using of elastic rubber bands. But walking is really, climbing stairs are all really important to promote the muscles, to stimulate, to make new muscle cells. And so that's really important, but it's also important for your bones. And of course, you need to eat a healthy diet. Make sure you get enough calcium, vitamin D, and protein in your diet to go with that. Non-like weight-bearing exercises can be really helpful if you have joint issues. So patients maybe who are overweight or obese, who have joint issues in their hip or in their knees in particular, would benefit from also non-weight-bearing exercises in a pool, for example, and swimming and so forth are helpful. So it is individualized, but definitely weight bearing is an important exercise of activities of daily life, of walking, of resistance exercise are really important to maintaining muscle mass. And there is evidence that as a strategy to help deal with that as a rehabilitation approach in combination with making sure your protein and your vitamin D intake is optimal, that there's some evidence that that's very helpful in patients with liver disease before transplant.
Yeah, I just want to add that Diana has spoken about weight-bearing exercise is good for the bone development as well and prevent bone loss. And osteoporosis or osteopenia is very common among Asian women. So, it is very important that we'll continue this weight bearing exercise. I mean, you don't necessarily have to buy any special equipment, but it's just simple walking.
Yeah.
You know, just continue walking and improve the muscle mass, and that will really help. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think my background being a physiotherapist, just knowing weight bearing exercise can still be very gentle. We talk about high impact versus low impact weight bearing. So again, those with joint conditions, it's really gentle walking, exercising. And again, I think with any other conditions that you may have, you may want to consult a physiotherapist or again your healthcare professional around what's good and what's recommended to avoid, even just climbing stairs or
I
things
agree.
like that. Yeah. So thank you. The next question. So is it normal to lose a significant amount of weight post-transplant? Shall we have Mandy start us off and then we can.
Sure. I guess it depends. Let's say if it's liver transplant, a lot of pre-liver transplant, they are carrying a lot of fluid weight. So in that case, I would say it's normal to lose a lot of weight in terms of the water weight. But some people do lose weight because of the loss of protein during their hospital stay. They may not eat well during their hospital stay. But in the long run, because that you're on anti-rejection medication, it may stimulate your appetite as well. So in the long run, it shouldn't be normal to lose weight. But in terms of, let's say, kidney transplant or any other transplant, it is not normal to lose a lot of weight post-transplant. Usually when you feel better with a good kidney, you may tend to eat better as well. So weight loss is not usually a problem post-transplant.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there like a guide in terms of the number of pounds or the percentage or the length of time that you're losing weight that, is a indication that should be seeking some additional clinical advice?
Let's say within a month, if you lose about 5% of your body weight, then that's a significant weight loss. Then in that case, I think you should contact your healthcare team.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm wondering too, if you would recommend a daily weight, because for patients with ascites, with all these increased fluid in the belly, this is what we recommend our patients to weigh themselves on a daily basis so that you can gauge based on the number and see how much water you have retained and so forth. And so if you have a scale at home, then that would help help yourself to monitor the weight loss.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to monitor your weight.
That's great. I think that's always helpful if you can keep a log. So if you do contact your health care professional, you have a bit of a log over time on what's happening and fluctuating. Thank you. All right, this is a great topic around insomnia. So there's nothing worse than not being able to sleep. So as a result, I have insomnia as a result of medications and do not want to try herbal remedies. Which foods will help me sleep? And maybe also, is there things that we should avoid eating to help us sleep? Shall we? I'm picking on Mandy quite a bit. Mandy, do you want to try that one and everyone else will join in?
I agree that not taking herbal remedies, it's a good idea because of the anti-rejection medication that you're on. It's not a good idea to take any herbal remedies before consulting your team. But in general, I would suggest taking a very light snack before sleeping because it's hard to sleep when you're on an empty stomach or when you feel hungry. And also cutting back on the caffeine later in the day. So maybe take it early in the morning or early in the afternoons because caffeine can affect your quality of sleep as well. Anything else the panelists want to add?
I just know the general advice is often to avoid lots of stimulus for your eyes. So the screen time before you go to lay down in your bed, you should stop looking at, and that's a problem I have myself, to turn off your computer, the TV, a good 15 to 20 minutes minimum. Some people say half an hour to an hour. So, and then when you go to bed, like go with the plan to go to sleep, so that you're not looking at all these other things. There are some things about the computer screens and your phone and whatever, in terms of your retina and the neural activity it stimulates, that might play a role in how well you sleep. But again, I'm not an expert, so that's just some general advice that we will give in clinic as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I can add is I'm no expert in insomnia, but again, is what Diana had said, like avoid all this stimulus before the bedtime. And also think about, I don't know whether you nap during the day, because this has happened to a lot of our patients with cirrhosis, that they cannot fall asleep at night is because they sleep during the day. Yeah. So if you could try to reverse that, like, you know, try to stay awake during the day, and then you would hopefully fall asleep more easily at night. And also, like, I noticed that you said that insomnia is a result of my medication. So, I mean, I don't know whether it's possible or not, and just talk to your prescriber and see what are the alternatives, and see whether any other medication that would be, you know, less side effect on this.
Thank you, everyone. It's 1 o'clock. The time has just flown by this hour on your nutrition questions answered. I think it was just incredible. I just want to thank our panel. Thank you so much, Diana, Mandy, and Kalina, for all your input and valuable advice, and to all the viewers who had incredible input into the questions. They were very, very helpful. And again, if you log into the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see it's been tape recorded as well. And please look at our schedule events coming up, www.livingorgandonation.ca. Again, a wonderful session to celebrate our Living Donor Week 2020 and building awareness. And again, thank you to our generous supporters, Astellas Pharma Company, Kearney and Cahill Families, and the Toronto General Western Foundation for their continued supports. So thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure moderating. I learned a lot, and I hope the viewers did as well. So thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.